The story of America's flag is the story of America's people. We'll share some of these incredible stories with you from 1776 to the 21st century. I'm Vince Papelli, and welcome to the Colorbearers. Our founding fathers concluded their Declaration of Independence with the words, "We mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor." The heart of America can be found in the stories of the courageous and the humble, the soldier and the volunteer, the young, the old, and people of all walks of American life. New York artist Scott Lebedo feels a tremendous sense of gratitude for the service of everyone whose actions embodied the words and the example of our founding fathers. He chose to express his gratitude in an unusual way, with a patriotic pilgrimage, a paintbrush, and a quest.
This is my canvas. I'm an artist, a patriotic artist. Who's better than me right now? Who can say they've done this? Decided to go around the country and paint a big, beautiful American flag on one rooftop in all of the 50 states. And as you know, this is the grand finale. Number 50, so I am complete with my mission. I started in North Carolina, this project here, but I got the idea when right after Hurricane Katrina, my community loaded up a big truck of supplies, medical supplies, right after the hurricane, and they needed someone to drive it down, so I volunteered. And I said, before I leave, you know what, I need to paint a flag somewhere in a unity aspect. And then at that moment, the military was starting to come over in the helicopters. And I told my friend that lived down there, who I was volunteering with, I said, I need a rooftop. I got to do a flag on a rooftop. And I realized that I just took these people for 5 minutes out of their living hell. You know, they were amazed that there's this crazy New Yorker on a rooftop in hot Mississippi painting an American flag for us. And that feeling, which I cannot explain, was super. And I said, on my way home, I had a 20-hour bus ride. I said, I got to do this in every state. I just drove 25,000 miles across America, but I just drove around the world. I did a rooftop for an Iraqi American who was so proud to be here. He came in '85 with his family. He said, oh, he's painting a flag for an Iraq. No. It's American.
I grew up in Baghdad, and my father born in Baghdad, I born in Baghdad. My grandfather came from Armenia. 1950, when they massacred the Turk massacred the Armenians, so he escaped to Baghdad. So my father born there, I born there, and I decided to come to America. Yeah, some guy came in and he said, I want to paint a flag on the roof. First I think there's something wrong with this guy, you know, why he wants to paint a flag on the roof. Then he explained what he's doing for the freedom and stuff like that. I said, go ahead, paint it. This is the flag Scott painted on the roof. And looks great. It's been almost, 3 years maybe? America is different than other countries because you want to do any business you want, you can do it, and there are a lot of opportunities. You can do anything you want, so it's a great country to live in. Scott, stop over. We miss you, or keep in touch. I'd like to have his number, maybe call him, talk to him. He's a very nice guy, and thank you, they did my roof.
I've met some unbelievable people that became family. 4 days I'm in someone's home, and when I leave, tears, and like I'm going off to war, and I lived there for 20 years. People heard my story, and there I am on the side of the road. I got $6 left in my pocket, it's on E, and somebody would just come up and say, here's $50. I heard your story, I saw you on the news. to just, now I have a place to stay in every state. You know, these people became friends, and then these other people I've stayed in. You got a place to stay, you got a ski lodge, no charge, you just come up here.
He's great. He's been staying here since Friday, and we'll be sad to see him go. He's like a brother.
Oh, yes, sir. Cindy took care of him, and he stayed over to the other house, and he's a mess. He's crazy. But he's a nice guy. He's got more stories than the law allows.
This is so not a political mission that I'm on. And the thing that I'm trying to do is, because I see that the youth, and I'm sure you know this, the youth sees patriotism as taboo. An American flag as taboo. It's pro-war, it's political, it's it. That's not the way it was supposed to be. It's tangled up in this negative arena, and it's not my job single-handedly, but this is my participation to try to separate it, make it cool again. I got a gift. You know, this is a gift, you know, give it back. And they love it, you know, they appreciate it. So we always argue because they're like, thank you so much for it. And I'm like, no, thank you first. Thank you. Well, no, but I'm like, no. Veterans trying to give me money. You know, I take donations I took from so many people, but veterans always trying to give me money. And I said, I can't take you money. Oh, come on, I almost got into fights with these. And I tell them, look, it's, you know, it's like me taking mom out for Mother's Day dinner and then giving her the bill. You know what I mean? It's a gift. Somebody's gonna give you a Christmas gift, you're not gonna pay them for it. You know, just accept my gift, you know. I got tremendous freedom to be the craziest artist I want to be. I gotta thank somebody for that.
No nation on earth honors its flag like America. Over the course of time, Old Glory has evolved from a military banner to a sacred icon. The story of our national flag begins here at the Betsy Ross House in Philadelphia.
Well, the real Betsy Ross was an educated woman who was bright, intelligent, probably pretty attractive from what we know, and also became a very successful businesswoman, as well as a patriot for the Revolutionary War and the cause, and a wife and a mother.
Betsy Ross may have made the first American flag, you know, maybe she didn't. It was probably Francis Hopkinson.
The legend has it that on one day, George Washington, George Ross, and Robert Morris visited Betsy Ross at her upholstery shop. There was a small parlor in the back of the house, and that she probably invited them to have a seat in the parlor and to discuss the commission of this flag. Her family signed affidavits to suggest that she told these stories throughout her life to both her children and to her grandchildren, that George Washington had visited her and commissioned her to make this flag.
She definitely was a flag maker, and she made tarps for ships and sails.
She actually probably used black powder, rolled them into paper cartridges with musket balls, and prepared them then for the army, basically. They would be stored in boxes.
So to do these kinds of things in support of the war effort must have been risky. Do you agree?
Risky for Betsy as well as many, many others. You know, when you think about the people that are walking around the streets that were signers of the Declaration, that were very much involved in the war effort, and certainly women were very much involved. And I think that's something that's overlooked a lot of times, is what role women really did have during the war. We know that women acted as spies. They also ran businesses when their husbands had to leave and go to war. They ran the farms and plantations when their husbands went to war. So they continued to really maintain the economy of the cities. And Betsy certainly was part of that. There has been some accounts that Betsy probably had British soldiers quartered in her home, just like many, many other families would have, as well as other women during the war. We have about 300,000 people that walk through the house in any given year. When they come to Philadelphia after the Independence Hall and sing the bell, they want to see the Betsy Ross House because it's such an important part of the story of our nation's birth.
Just across the street from the Betsy Ross House is Humphrey's Flag Company, carrying on the proud tradition of flag making for over 140 years.
The company started as sailmakers in 1805 in New York City. And the story goes, and we've read this in a book, that the Ross grandchildren were leaving Philadelphia, and the sailmakers had heard of that, and there was going to be a void of decorators in Philadelphia. And the centennial was going to be coming up, and Philadelphia would be the host city for the centennial, and Humphreys moved up here and started their decorating and flag manufacturing business in 1864. And they were a major supplier for the centennial. Around the turn of the century, there was a joke that went, they're making houses so fast for the immigrants that they must be Humphreys tents.
These tables are primarily for setting up jobs. We use a lot of different manufacturing techniques. These are done digitally with a machine that prints with dye. After they're printed with dye, the fabric has to be steamed and washed. That sets the dye. But primarily this table are for setups. Sherry's working on the field for a 30 by 50 US flag. She's setting up, this is a short row of stars. On the American flag, they alternate long rows and short rows. So she's setting these up in position. When it's sewn to the piece of blue above it, which will have a long row of stars, they'll line up properly. These stars will be zigzagged 3 times all the way around, and then the excess white will be cut off on this side, and the blue will be cut out on the other side, so essentially it'll just one layer of fabric.
We've made the bunting for both of Clinton's inaugurations, and I believe one of Bush 1's inaugurations. This is just 36-inch wide fabric bunting, and we couldn't get the ink to print onto the blue without coming out baby blue, and this ink here is actually Sears Weather Beater paint.
Yeah, a man named Ski Dembski from Long Beach, California, a real patriotic American. He lives in a working class section of Long Beach in a little house with probably a 100 by 100 foot lot, and he's got he had a 125 foot flagpole going up over his yard, and he'd fly like a 30 by 50 US flag, so his American flag was flapping over most of the properties in his neighborhood. He was a cool guy. But one of his friends visited our store in Philadelphia once as a tourist, and a year later or so, Ski called and asked if we wanted to make the biggest flag in the world. At the time, it was a Chinese flag, and he thought it was really inappropriate that the American flag wasn't the biggest flag in the world. So we said, yeah, we'll make it. We really didn't know how we were going to do it. The stripes were 20 feet wide. The stars were 16 feet high. So it had to be put together almost like a jigsaw puzzle, and everything had to be figured out so that when it was joined together, it would work. You can't get a lot of fabric underneath the arm of the machine, so it had to be designed so that it could be done in smaller pieces. And it took us about 3 months. It was a lot of fun. It was a real good project. And his intention was to take it all over the country and display it in football fields, but none of the football fields were big enough. The flag was 500 feet long and 270 feet wide, and that's too big for almost every football stadium. He opened it somewhere in San Francisco, and he opened it in the mall in D.C., on the mall in D.C., and he hung it off the Hoover Dam in, I guess, '96, when the torchbearer for the Olympics was running across the Hoover Dam. So that's primarily how he displayed it.
Can I ask what a flag like that would cost to make?
We charged him $44,000, and that was our cost with material and labor. But it was a lot of fun. We really do make a lot of different flags. We make them for all the countries in the world. We make them for all the states. We make them for hundreds and hundreds of corporations, individuals who just have a wild idea and they want to make their own flag. But when you're making an American flag, it's just everybody just pulls together. Everybody watches it more closely and says, wait a minute, I think this is wrong. We don't want to do this here. How can we make this stronger? How can we make this better? They do that with the American flag. Almost every employee, and certainly everybody in the family that's involved in the company, more than with any other flag. You've made something that represents one of the great achievements of civilization. And the American flag really does, it really is the symbol. That's why there's all this brouhaha about desecrating the flag. You're just not supposed to do it. It's treated differently from any other piece of fabric.
When I see the U.S. flag, it does mean our soldiers, and it does mean what my father did in World War II, but it also represents what he fought for. And he fought for me to have my own thoughts about what the flag means, and no one should tell me what it should mean for me.
What is a patriot?
Patriot is someone who has a deep love for his country.
When the creatures that became human beings came out of the trees and started running around the savannas in Africa, they had to live in tribes. And I think the ones that didn't survive. And I think in order to survive, you have to work with the other members of the tribe. And that's what a patriot is, I think. It's somebody who feels they'll give up their life for the tribe. And if they didn't, then we would not have evolved to be able to live together in countries. I think it's that basic.
I think patriotism is someone who believes in his country, not right or wrong, but he wants it to be right and he wants to make it right.
Betsy Ross wasn't the only famous flag maker from Philadelphia. We have to go 100 miles south to Baltimore to hear the story of Mary Pickersgill and the Star-Spangled Banner.
This is the Star-Spangled Banner Flag House. It's where the Star-Spangled Banner flag was made, the flag that inspired the poem that became our national anthem. It was the home of Mary Pickersgill and her family. And she brought a flag-making business here from Philadelphia that in fact she inherited from her mother, Rebecca Young. Mary was an extraordinary woman for her time. It's probably in part because she was raised by an extraordinary woman herself. Rebecca Young made flags during the American Revolution. She was widowed during the Revolution. In fact, Mary herself was born in 1776. In 1813, Mary and her family was asked to make the flag that we would know today as the Star-Spangled Banner. George Armistead, the commander of Fort McHenry, ordered a flag that was 30 feet by 42 feet, an extraordinary size for a garrison flag. The flag was so enormous that they actually had to take the flag to a brewery next door where they were able to lay out the blue field of this flag and lay out the stars and stitch them on.
The British Amphibious Army is going to enter Chesapeake Bay, and it's going to capture Washington, D.C. and burn a lot of the public buildings. And then it will next set its sights on Baltimore, which back then was a much more important city. It was a big port. In order to capture Baltimore, though, the British fleet will have to silence an American fort guarding the approaches to the city called Fort McHenry.
Fort McHenry was mainly constructed beginning in 1798 and essentially completed by 1803. It was built principally to protect and defend the city of Baltimore against an enemy coming by water. The commander of the fort here, 34-year-old Major George Armistead, had 1,000 men under his command at this post.
The British will send about 16 vessels, light warships, rocket ships, what they call bomb catches, which would fire high trajectory shells over fort walls into the fort.
So the 16 warships face out in front of the fort and begin what becomes a 25-hour bombardment of this fort.
The 25 hours were from September 13th to September 14th, 1814.
Major Armistead would estimate later between 1,500 and 1,800 bombs and rockets are thrown at the fort.
They began this bombardment in the dawning hours of September 13th, 1814, and it continued until the next morning. And during this time, there were heavy clouds in the sky, there was rain. As you can imagine, there was a lot of smoke in the air as the British ships continued their bombardment, which was almost ceaseless for 25 hours.
In the morning of September 14th, the forces here at the fort look out at those 16 ships in front of them and they see that they're moving away. Their sail actually moving away from the fort. And the Americans here decide to raise up a large banner of victory over the fort. One British naval officer took note of this and said, "As we set sail, the Americans raised a superb and splendid ensign over the battery." The commander of the fort wanted a flag so big that the enemy would have no difficulty seeing it from a distance.
There's the biggest flag that we've ever had raised. And what does it do? It defies the British.
And watching it from one of the British warships will be an American lawyer, Francis Scott Key, who was trying to negotiate the release of a civilian that the British had arrested earlier. The sun goes down. All he could see are the rocket's red glare and the shells bursting from the British bombardment, and he doesn't know if the fort's still holding out, and he's yearning for daylight to catch a glimpse of that flag if it's still there.
And around 9 o'clock in the morning gun at Fort McHenry reported. And that was the signal to the people of the city that all was well. Having heard the morning gun, he knew that the Americans had successfully defended the fort. And he was so moved that he began to write down his thoughts. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming? Now it catches the gleam of the morning's first beam, in full glory reflected, now shines in the stream. 'Tis the star-spangled banner. Then conquer we must, when our cause it is just. And this be our motto, in God is our trust. And the star-spangled banner in triumph shall wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Some of the most inspiring flag stories come from the Civil War, where being a color bearer meant leading your troops in the battle, holding only a flag, while everyone else around you was holding a gun.
During the Civil War, the highest possible honor that you could be awarded if you were an enlisted man would be an assignment to the color guard. The sergeants weren't armed because the flags were big, they needed both hands to hold on to them. The corporals carried their weapons. If you're in the color guard, you're still a bullet magnet.
And today we are here to honor James Seitzinger, a Civil War Medal of Honor recipient.
Private Seitzinger was a very young boy and carried a musket in the company side by side with his father, who was also a gallant soldier. At the Battle of Cold Harbor, June 3rd, 1864, when the regiment was moving in the...
Cold Harbor is really, it's probably in the annals of the Civil War one of the least talked about, but probably one of the worst campaigns or worst battles that any soldier would have had to endure.
Ulysses S. Grant would call his decisions at Cold Harbor the biggest mistakes he ever made.
Cold Harbor was vicious.
During the attack, I remember reading accounts where the soldiers had to lean forward as if they were going into a wind because of the amount of lead that was flying toward them.
The Confederates had 24 hours to dig in. And by that point in the war, veteran soldiers knew that if you gave Johnny Reb 24 hours to dig trenches, and if he could put a couple artillery batteries behind him on a hill, he could hold off 3 times his weight in Yankees.
Some soldiers wrote their names at the beginning of what we would call dog tags, wrote their name and their personal information on little slips of paper and had them pinned to their chests and their backs because they figured they weren't going to survive this.
So when the time came to attack on June 3rd, 1864, a lot of those federal troops knew that they were making a suicide charge. In fact, later that day on the body of one of these Union soldiers, they'd find his pocket diary in which he wrote the night before, June 3rd, 1864, I was killed. Well, James Monroe Seitzinger was a 17-year-old in April of 1864 when he enlisted in the 116th Pennsylvania Volunteer Infantry. His father enlisted the same day. His father, who had previous military experience, was made a sergeant. A lot of fellows who were underage lied about their age. Although it's funny, a lot of them were good Bible-bred Protestants, and telling a bald-faced lie, they couldn't do it. They would take a piece of paper and write the number 18 on it and stick it in their shoe. And when the recruiting officer said, "Are you over 18?" they could truthfully say yes.
In the charge on Cold Harbor on the morning of June 3rd, 1864, our color sergeant was shot down through the midst of the shot and shell.
And James is the first person to react, and he picks up the colors and turns to his father and yells, "Come on, Pop, I am all right," and goes forward and helps to lead the attack.
And yet when he grabs the flag, what does he say? "Come on, Pop, I'm all right." It's very personal, and it's not for country, for, you know, for God, for, you know, it's, "Come on, Pop, I'm all right."
There are about 3,459 Medal of Honor recipients, and it's great today to be able to honor someone from our local area who was a recipient of that medal.
What do you have there? This is the Medal of Honor that my great-grandfather received. He received it in, well, he earned it in 1864, but he got it in 1906.
What does it say on the back of the medal?
It says Sergeant James M. Seitzinger, Company G, 116th, Cold Harbor, June 3, 1864.
James Seitzinger defiantly picks up the flag and carries it, knowing full well that he's now the focal point of almost every Confederate that's within range to shoot at him.
These are the staffs for all of the flags in the collection. This is actually the drawer that has the two for the 116th right now, and you can see right here is the mark. That's how far down the flag would have come on the staff. My name is Jason Wilson. I'm a research historian for the Pennsylvania State Capitol Preservation Committee. There's about 390 flags overall in the Commonwealth's collection. 368 or so are Civil War flags. And this is actually the third issue state color for the 116th Pennsylvania. So your great-grandfather would have served under this in the later half of the war after his time at Cold Harbor.
I never imagined they were this large.
Yeah,
I had no concept really of what they were like.
Yeah, the majority of the flags in the collection are 6 feet square.
So after he got it, and they got, I guess, when things settled down, he had to hand it over to someone else because he wasn't strong enough, big enough to carry something this big. And now I understand why, but I didn't before.
So, Gene, what did you think of going and seeing the flags today?
Oh, I just think it was so wonderful. I didn't imagine there would be anything at all, much less some they're trying to conserve. It sends a chill up your spine that it was the actual thing. I have to tell my brother and sister, all my relatives.
America's been through the good times and the bad times since the War of 1812, and so was the original Star-Spangled Banner. It's truly an American treasure. The National Museum of American History has the responsibility of conserving and displaying the Star-Spangled Banner. It's a big job, but the Smithsonian staff is up to the challenge.
The current preservation effort for the flag really started in November of 1996. One of the really nice things that's happened over the course of preserving the flag on public view, like we did in the lab, was we got to talk to people on a daily basis. And we got to ask them, well, what do you expect the flag to look like? What do you want your flag to look like? It was very interesting to hear people say that they expected the flag to look damaged. They expected it to look old. They didn't want it to look new. And we have 30 by 34 feet of the flag left. You don't realize how big that is until you realize you have to treat every square inch of the flag. We would work on a movable bridge that spanned the flag, so the flag could lay very stress-free on a table. We were laying on our stomachs. We were working average 6 hours a day in that position. Amelia Fowler was the first documented woman who worked on preserving the flag. We estimate that Mrs. Fowler and her crew probably put in 1.7 million stitches when she originally attached the linen in 1914. It took us about 9 months to take those stitches out. I think when the public return to the National Museum of American History, they're going to be very surprised and hopefully very pleased with the new exhibition gallery for Star-Spangled Banner. The room is very, very carefully designed to preserve the flag. The light levels are kept very low. The environment is very protected. But the public's not going to notice that, because as they walk down a 75-foot corridor and start getting a sense of what the War of 1812 was all about, their eyes are going to be adjusting, and they're going to turn the corner and they're going to come up to a glass wall, and within 2 feet of them will be the Star-Spangled Banner spread out in front of them. It's been cared for nearly 100 years by the Smithsonian in the same tradition of care and concern for its well-being. And we hope that with the new exhibition, we're going to be able to have many, many more generations come see the flag in the future.
Ben Crippen, he was the color sergeant of the 143rd Pennsylvania Infantry. They were the newest regiment in Colonel Roy Stone's Bucktail Brigade.
During the first day on the Battle of Gettysburg, Union troops from the Army of the Potomac's 1st Corps tried to stop the Confederates advancing into the town from the northwest along the Chambersburg Pike. They made their stand at McPherson's Ridge.
They were literally yards away from the Confederates who were charging at them and pushing them back.
The 143rd Pennsylvania fights a stubborn rearguard action. It begins falling back a short distance and turning around and firing at the Confederates, trying to keep them at bay. And in the course of this withdrawal, Sergeant Ben Crippen, who's carrying the national color, the Stars and Stripes of the 143rd Pennsylvania, he lags behind all his comrades. And he will turn on the Confederates and he'll shake his fist at them while he's holding the flag in a sign of defiance.
And they gunned him down. But apparently simply this gesture, this gesture of anger was not sufficient to rally the regiment and allow them to hold on.
Carrying the colors makes you a conspicuous target as it is, because the enemy can see where you are at a great distance. But to stand apart from your comrades and at the same time, in effect, say, you know, up yours, buddy, in the middle of a firefight. He was doing that to inspirit his own comrades, to inspire them to hang tough, not to break, that, you know, if I'm not afraid to make a target out of myself, you shouldn't be afraid to hold the position either.
It was a very personal thing that the enemy was trying to take your colors. They were trying to take a piece of your regiment, your pride and joy, but also maybe a reflection of what they called the battle rage, which is just sort of this insensible anger in combat, that you would take a moment in the midst of great danger to shake your fist at the enemy, like, you know, damn you, you know, you're not going to take this from us, you know. And it cost him his life, and yet, you know, the regiment, it clearly was burned in their memory, that they put it on their monument, and it's I've seen a painting of the incident. It's very well documented and is part of the lore. It's elevated to that point.
What you're seeing depicted in this painting is the line of the 143rd Pennsylvania Infantry as they're falling back towards Seminary Ridge. You can see the Lutheran Seminary here in the painting. Ben Crippen is featured prominently in the center of the painting, shaking his fist. I wanted that action to be prominent in the depiction of this particular scene. I hope that my humble depiction is something that will bring honor to the memory of Ben, as well as the honor of the family of Ben Crippen.
Anyone who visits the battlefield of Gettysburg and sees that granite monument that the 143rd erected in Crippen's honor, and there he is in bas relief, again shaking his fist toward the rebels and holding the colors in the other hand. I saw that when I was a kid, and I knew who Crippen was, and I've always remembered that story. And I'm sure there are other Americans, and they may not have known his name, but they know what he did, and they know the message that he was sending. Out of the blue, I received an email from Randy Alexander, who turned out to be a descendant of Sergeant Ben Crippen.
Ever since I can remember, you know, I wish I could remember earlier, but right now I can remember my dad saying, okay, we're going to Gettysburg to see Uncle Ben. And at the time we might say, oh boy, here we go. Are we going to stop off at Stuckey's, you know, like the 7-Elevens? We didn't realize why our dad was taking us there until now.
In the family, we had talked about Uncle Ben Crippen for years and years and years. And it's been a tradition. We all had to have our picture taken in front of Uncle Ben's monument.
And everyone in the family knew about him, what he did. And it inspired us, and it inspired me, even to this day.
We've been going there with every generation as far as I can remember. It just keeps going on and on.
It's going to continue.
Yeah, every 5 years or so, he said, we got to go to Gettysburg again. Oh, we got to go to Gettysburg. And this kept going on. I don't know how many times I really took you to Gettysburg.
Quite a bit. Well, the story that we have, which could be changed through the century, you know, the generations, that before he went to war, he had a coin. No one really knew what type, all speculation, that he gave to his brother, saying, when I return, give me back my coin. We don't know what type of coin it was. We don't know any other part of the story, but of course Ben never returned. I think that coin then got passed down through our generations, and that was a treasured piece throughout the family, and finally ended up at the Historical Society there in Lackawanna. The tradition of Ben lives, in our family even to this day, over 100 years later. But that was another story that, kind of was inspiring to us. He knew he was going to war, didn't know when he was coming back, gave that coin to his younger brother. I'm sure his brother was upset, being young at the time. So you can imagine what the story was when Ben never came home.
We have a vested interest in this country because of Ben Crippen. That's what makes me feel, and I guess I always knew it, but to hear somebody say that, we have a vested interest of our blood in this country.
So when I see these people saying First Amendment right, which it probably is, I look at Uncle Ben and wonder if he would have the same feelings about these people wanting to burn the flag, desecrate it. I'm sure that generation there would have a little bit different feeling about these modern people having their First Amendment rights.
Fortunately, there are a lot of families like the Alexanders. They're the kind of people who have held this country together over the years, and I think that we'll continue to see more folks like that, especially as long as stories like Ben Crippen's are remembered.
Since 1814, Americans have been doing their best to sing the Star-Spangled Banner. But no one sings it quite like the #1 anthemist in the National Hockey League, a woman with the heart of a champion and the voice of an angel, Lauren Hart.
Who's Lauren Hart? Lauren Hart sings the national anthem for the Flyers. She's great. She's great. She's as good as it gets.
And now, fans, may I ask you to please rise and move your hats and salute to our flag as we welcome their #1 ranked anthemist in the NHL, our very own Lauren Hart, as she carries on the voice of the Flyers and sings the Star-Spangled Banner.
There was so much passion for my father and what he meant to the city of Philadelphia learning hockey.
Gene Hart is the voice of the Flyers. The Flyers have won the Stanley Cup! The Flyers have won the Stanley Cup!
Ladies and gentlemen, the Flyers are going to win the Stanley Cup! The Flyers win the Stanley Cup! The Flyers win the Stanley Cup!
He had a special relationship with the fans here, unlike most of the players who sort of would come and go over the years. He really ingrained himself into the hearts, into the minds of Philadelphians. It's not just another gig for me. This is family here. This has been a healing place for me with the loss of my father and my own illness. This has been support for me career-wise as a struggling artist or a new musician. I always had a job and a place to come to, and a way to nurture or build an audience. I've made tons of friends. There's a safety zone here, and 20,000 people cheering for you. You don't get that in too many places. I think in general, anytime that I sing the anthems here, I have one thing in mind, and that's my father. And to me, when he passed away, this was my way of paying tribute to him, and it was my way to honor his memory. And I thought that the year that he had passed away, that year I was going to sing at every game. And then as circumstances changed in my own life with my health, and as 9/11 happened, and all these things sort of perpetuated that spot and the meaning of that, and it really kept me tied to doing it. And I still every night walk out there and look up to the press box and sing it for my father, first and foremost. The flag to me represents hope of what things might be. and that there is always hope. And I hear song when I see the flag, and that's a good thing.
The 54th Massachusetts Volunteer Infantry was the first black regiment raised by a northern state east of the Mississippi, and it's going to be the most famous. During the 54th Massachusetts' first big battle, the assault on Fort Wagner.
It was July 18th, 1863.
And leading the way up was the sergeant who was carrying the regiment's national color, William H. Kearny.
Sergeant Kearny's sister, whose name was Mary Kearny Mindu, is my great-great-grandmother.
He's able to get to the top. His colonel is killed in front of him. He's hit 3 or 4 times, but he keeps waving the flag as a rallying point.
Men are shot, left and right. I mean, they're going down by, unfortunately, by the numbers. Sergeant Kearny sees the color bearer injured, throws his musket aside, reaches his flag, and then for the next 3 to 4 hours holds on to that flag.
Eventually, the 54th suffers more than 40% casualties and has to retreat. And Kearny goes back. I mean, he's hit in both legs. He's hit in his shoulder, possibly his breast as well. He has to retreat on his knees for nearly a mile. But he won't give up that flag. He's going to get that back. He's not going to let it fall into enemy hands. He makes his way to a Union Field hospital, and he comes in, and I mean, he must have been soaked with his own blood. And people are just amazed that he's still able to move. And just before he faints, he says,
"Boys, I only did my duty. The old flag never touched the ground."
Graham Nash wrote, "Teach your children well and feed them on your dreams." We can only teach our children well if we tell them all of America's history, and we feed them on our dreams when we use the lessons of our past to shape our future.
On May 30th, 1916, President Wilson established June 14th of each year as Flag Day, the culmination of more than a quarter century of effort to engender interest in the observance of Flag Day.
I'm Dick Patterson. I'm one of the founding members of the American Flag Foundation. The mission of the American Flag Foundation is to educate the American people, especially children, about the history of our nation and the patriots that founded our nation. Come to Baltimore, Maryland, and you can see 2 special events. Flag Day on June 14th, and also the Living American Flag in May of each year.
Some of my fellow staff members joke with me and say I was here for the original Living Flag, which took place back in 1914 on the anniversary, the 100th anniversary of the battle. But no, I was not there for that, but I've been here for the Living Flag. Back at that time, they wore capes of the different colors, red, white, and blue, and with the Living Flag now, they have placards that are red, white, and blue and hold them up over their heads to form the American flag.
We're a proud nation. We have great history to carry forth. And if we don't carry that message forward to our next generation, we'll lose it. And it's going to be lost.
The first thing is tell the truth. Not be ashamed of what was done. Let's not be ashamed that at one time that the troops were segregated. Let's not be ashamed about it. It is what it is. Hopefully we can learn from that. People were still able to show you that they love this country, even though you didn't want to have them in the same room with you. You still saw that work, and it can work.
And the No Child Left Behind educational program, social studies is not part of it any longer for testing. And the problem is that you're not learning in schools about the American history. It's become a big issue. Who are the patriots? Who are the people?
was really upset when they had the movie Glory. Well, I thought it was very important because nothing had been done with this subject in the way that it was done, but they did not give the black man the positive. They talked about Colonel Gould Shaw, and he was a very, very important man because he came back at great odds. But here, look at the story that you could have told. You could have told about the glory, the greatness of Colonel Robert Gould Shaw, and then you could have shown the real picture of William H. Carney and showed how black and white come together. No, they didn't do that. What they did is that they made a composite about probably the most important black person in the Battle of Fort Wagner, rather than giving him his name. You never hear his name mentioned. They will tell you they called me, and they did, and I wanted to help them. They wanted our reenactment group to be a part of it. Some of us couldn't because of families. I didn't become a part of it because they wanted to have me justify things because it's Hollywood that were not true. And my uncle was a true American, and I was not going to let a movie change what he did because it would make the story a little bit better. They were not whippings. The men in the North of 50 were not whipped. They were not out there chopping down watermelon. I was not. Those are stereotypes. And while they may have happened in other places, they did not happen in Reedfield, Massachusetts. And I wasn't going to let my uncle be a part of that. Even though I still appreciate the movie, we shouldn't think that it's Black History Month. It should be American history every day. And then we don't have to have Black history. If every time we tell the stories of great things in America and we make sure that we're equal to those participants, we don't have to have Women's Days, we don't have to have Black History Day, we don't have to have Hispanic Day. We have America Day. Celebrate America.
Patriots are people who believe in a cause that is important to them, that becomes a part of the fabric of their lives.
Well, my country 'tis of thee. I mean, it is my country too. It's still the greatest place in the world.
We few, we happy few, we band of brothers. Shakespeare wrote these words about the bond that soldiers have for each other. After the Vietnam War, Americans learned that we can hate the war, but we must honor the soldier.
The men and women who fought in Vietnam, they were not well treated by this country.
My time in Vietnam was spent with, I was on aircraft, I flew aircraft all the time, you know, and the worst part I ever had the whole time I was there was the 10 days before I left. We had a major rocket attack, and one hit right in front of the hooch I was in, and it blew us all to the rear of the hooch. And I'll never forget this. We're all laying there on the floor, and, you know, and your ears are ringing, and you're trying to get your head cleared up and all that. And my buddy's laying there, and he looks over at me and he says, "Damn, that was close." You know, and we're like, close? We're all laying in a big heap on the floor, you know, and it felt like my fillings fell out. And he's pulling on my, that's what he was doing. He was pulling on my leg, thinking, he said, "Is this leg attached to something?" You know. But that's the common thing, that you have that bond that we were talking about, you know, those idiotic things that you think about like that. But then after that, you know, then you're like totally petrified, you know, freaking 10 days left and I'm going to get killed, you know.
My uniform was a regular GI uniform with medical pouches, a Red Cross on both sleeves, and a painted Red Cross on the helmet.
When you were flying missions in Germany, what aircraft did you fly?
P-47 Thunderbolt. I think it was Hill 113. They reported 6 to 8 German 88s tanks right there, ready to do battle, and we would have to climb the hill, and we'd be dead ducks. So it needed air support.
The squadron leader does all the navigating. You fly in his wing, you fly in close formation looking for other targets and so on.
Within 10 minutes, we've seen 6 P-47, wonderful, beautiful P-47s, come in and tip their wings. They want to know the position. So we give them the position, and 5 minutes later, there were no more German tanks. Thank God. And then we took the hill.
If you had a P-47 pilot standing in front of you right now, what
I
would
would have kissed him. I did. I kissed a lot of them. It don't mean nothing. And P-47s, they were the greatest planes in the world. The Germans, they used to hate that plane. They used to dislike it because they say, oh my, they used to call that Jabu, which means that it's terrible, something like that in German. I don't know, that's what they used to call them.
Hello, Tom. How are you? Very great to meet you.
I was a fighter pilot and flew P-47s. We did dive bombing and strafing.
And all of a sudden we saw about six, I think it was 6 P-47. Oh, we were so happy. They come in and tip their wings, you know, they want to know where the target was. So they come in and they show the target, and the P-47s just whip away. In 5 minutes, there was no more Tiger tanks. Good. And the captain says, now we'll take the hill. And it did. Good. And that was it. And we saved a lot of money for that. Oh, I love them P-47s. Yeah. Oh,
You form this bond of, it's a bond of lower guys that, you know, you're together. You're the ones doing the dirty deed, to say, the battle, the fighting, and the being shot at and being hurt and being injured.
It's maybe even stronger with veterans because when you come back from something like this and you get married and you start raising your children, this isn't something you want to share with them. This isn't something you want to tell your wife, but you've got to talk it out with somebody. And having fellows who've been there with you, that's a tremendous comfort. I've been to veterans reunions, and these guys, they may not see each other for 365 days at a time, but as soon as they're in contact again, it's like they've never been apart.
You know, when you go up on Memorial Day and you go into a cemetery and you see all those flags flying on all those graves, and you look at, I always call it in the company of heroes, because each one of those graves marks a hero. Each one of those graves you walk upon, you put your hand on that tombstone, there's a story there that he could tell you about his duty and his services.
We lost about 18,000 guys in Iwo Jima in a week.
We lost 6,000 the first day they invaded Iwo Jima.
The battle for Iwo Jima, considering the number of men involved, was the bloodiest battle in the history of the Marine Corps.
Did you know where your brother was on Iwo Jima?
Yeah. Well, I knew where the 4th Division was. They were to the right of, like, the 5th was on the left side and the 4th was on the right side. So I commandeered a Jeep and took off up there. He was only up about 2.5 miles, 2 miles up this little road they had. And I found his unit, and we had a nice visit.
What did you talk about?
When we're going home. when we're getting out. There was a lieutenant, as I understand it, a corpsman, and another Marine. They found a piece of pipe, about 8-10 foot. They tied the flag on that and stood it up.
To signify that they made it, they'll raise a flag, they'll find a pipe and they'll lash a flag to it, and they'll put it up.
Of course, everyone, you know, at the base of Suribachi could see that. You could see it almost from every position in the island.
And that will be seen by all the Marines below them, and also be seen by the supporting warships out to sea, which will start blowing their whistles, and the troops will be cheering and things like that.
That brought a whole new light to those soldiers at Iwo Jima. The battle wasn't over by any light, but there was that flag raised upon that, which gave them hope and honor and a feeling.
And one of the people who is witnessing this scene is James V. Forrestal, the Secretary of the Navy. And he will turn to a senior Marine general and say that that flag raising will guarantee a Marine Corps for the next 500 years. But it's not that big a flag, and a larger one will be sent up, and it'll be raised about 3 hours later. And as it goes up, a wire service photographer named Joe Rosenthal will take a picture, and he doesn't really think it's that big a deal. Everyone has their backs to him.
And of course, that picture was seen around the world.
And that will capture the nation's imagination. It will become the icon for major war bond drive, and it will become really the icon of the Marine Corps.
At this very hour, young American men and women are in uniform and in harm's way in foreign lands and dangerous places.
We are thankful for your continued vigilance and observance of the men and women killed in Afghanistan and Iraq. Please don't stop until they all come home. It occurred when we couldn't find out how many kids were getting killed in the war. You know, so I'll put up a sign and I'll put up a flag for every person who is killed, so people who come by know that something's going on. First poll I put up was this, and it was 300 flags.
You don't run out to the store and buy a flag every time you put one more flag up?
No, we buy them by the 500, I think.
Okay.
How many do we have in stock?
There's another box of flags in there.
There's another box at my studio. Yeah, makes me sad. So thank you again for providing this daily reminder and honoring those who have given their lives in the service of their country.
It's very simple, you know, and it's what I tell a lot of people too. It's two little words. Thank you. No matter World War II veteran, somebody that just came home in the supermarket, just go tap me on the shoulder. Thanks. Vietnam veteran, you make their week. 30 years later, thank you. What? That's it, thank you.
September 11th, 2001 was a day like no other in recent memory. When the instinct for survival drove most people to leave the collapsing Twin Towers, our first responders stayed. And amid the devastation of Ground Zero, 3 New York firefighters raised a flag. It was reminiscent of the Iwo Jima flag, and it captured our hearts.
Just like they did those firemen at 9/11. Yes, we lost an enormous bit. We got hit right in the face and got punched, but we were not out.
Because those firemen, just like soldiers in the Civil War, just like soldiers in World War II, they knew that their number was going to be up.
Right after the attacks in 2001, it was impossible to buy a U.S. flag in the United States. You couldn't get one for your house. You couldn't get one for your business.
After the 9/11, every other car had a flag and sticking in the window somewhere. Some of them had little stickers, but mine's a flag flying in the breeze. We ought to do that more.
To see the flag fly, what great defiance was there after 9/11 than to put that flag up over the spot where they thought they had defeated us?
Seeing that pristine symbol of American pride and strength flapping over that scene of devastation, it communicated the message that we're hurt but we're not licked.
That was great. That was a symbol that you'd hurt us, but we'll be back. Like the song says, "These colors don't run."
That image, just like the Iwo Jima photo, is a strong symbol of American bravery.
As long as the Stars and Stripes fly, we're going to be a proud country.
We'll be back. We're not dead yet. That's why the raising of the flag means to me.
What is a patriot?
My, what a good question.
We put your name up on the screen to say, "This is Bob Rader." What do you want us to say? Air Force retired, or how do you want us to say that?
Patriot.
Okay.
I guess a patriot is an individual that is true to his nation, true to his country, true to the cause. I think that's what a patriot is.
Patriotism is not a loyalty oath. It is the understanding that you must love your country, but always believe it can be improved. To always ask, can't we do better?
To me, the American flag represents all that goodness. Okay. And if there is badness happening, the American flag doesn't represent it. It represents the goodness to me.
Patriots are people who believe in a cause that is important to them, that becomes a part of the fabric of their lives.
You know, by me being patriotic is to say thank you and like appreciate, like this place is unbelievable. I mean, we got crooked politicians, we got cryberry movie stars, we got crazy, it's just so, it's beautiful, the diversity, the clash of opinions, and that's the beauty of it.
It's not always easy to follow the ideas of men that came here, you know, hundreds of years ago. They're pretty lofty ideals, and you don't really find them anywhere else in the world. But true patriots are people that try to live that dream.
The flag, to me, is the mainstay of our country. Our flag represents what we are.
We feel that the American flag is part of that symbol, and that's part of our thrust to have everyone believe that and respect the flag. And it also goes back to the history of our nation. We're a proud nation. We have great history to carry forth. And if we don't carry that message forward to our next generation, we'll lose it.
It's still fresh in the family memory of choosing to be an American. So I guess I'm very conscious of the fact that the flag does represent America and represents probably some of the best things of America.
Patriot looks after other people and looks after his country with pride. And nobody's going to come in here and mess with him, a patriot.
Thank the Lord if you believe in God. If you're not, you still should believe in your lucky stars that you were born in this country.
But I notice a lot of people forgetting why we have that, and I just want, be a patriot, just acknowledge that.
The fact that people thought that there could be a better life, and that certainly resonates with people that are children of immigrants, because that's exactly why their parents came over here.
Patriotism is a part of your life. It's hard to describe, you can't feel it and touch it, but it's part of your life. Once you have it, you'll never forget it.
So these were just a few of the countless stories of American courage and honor, each person proudly bearing the colors in their own way. And whether you volunteer your service, help a neighbor, teach your children, or just get out and vote, you will be honoring America's ideals and proudly bearing the colors. For the Colorbearers, I'm Vince Papelli, and thanks for watching.